Hello there, boxing fans around the world. Thank you for joining us once again as we see more and more headlines across the world related to the heavyweights in light of the Fury and Wilder fight this past weekend. I got to say, it's great for boxing. It's great for the sport. But the issue has been raised, and I'll tell you what I'm reading that caught my attention. Should Wilder be facing this guy? Should the typical array? Should he be facing Joshua? Should he be facing Usyk? Should he be facing White? And I'm saying to myself, should he be facing anyone? And the reason I say this is because he got into the sport as a teenager, working at the time. I think he was flipping pancakes at a local pancake shop. And at the end of the day, he got into it because he got his girlfriend pregnant. And they were told by the medical community that their daughter would be born with a pretty rare spinal disorder that whereby she wouldn't be able to walk, and he'd be incurring an awful lot of medical bills to fix it. So he got into the sport of boxing because of his daughter. Okay. Flash forward quite a few years. His daughter has had those surgeries when she was a baby. She can walk. She can do cartwheels, apparently. She's a bright young lady. And now Wilder's sitting on a few million quid. And does he really need to box anymore? And my answer to our question is he should retire. His time is done. He's done his job. Out the ring you go. Let some young guys move in. There you go. There's my intro.
Yes, he should retire. Maybe, but maybe not. It's a very good question. Now, a lot has been made in the only headline, because I'm just behind with a few things at the moment, but there's been something that's been that I have seen in the very quick flick round of the headlines, and that is that he's been handed a 6-month sentence off of boxing because of the concussive knockout. Well, would have he really fought within 6 months anyway? No. Nobody really would have, especially on the back of a loss like that. You know, it just reminds me of, it's going off key, but it's like when Canelo was given a 6-month suspension for the drug use or whatever. Was he going to really, did that affect him? He wouldn't have fought within 6 months anyway. Back to Deontay, no, he wouldn't have. And as you said, with all the fantasy matchups that are being made, these are doing the rounds. And I had a quick look when we're deciding what to do today. And, it is Wilder and Fury, which is the main topic. Give it a few more days, and I think the Canelo fight will start kicking a bit more, and the questions will start raising with that. But, should he fight again? He's 35. I think it is, especially when you get hard fights and a concussive knockout at the end of the career, as much as 35 is still relatively young, physiologically it won't do him very good as a boxer at all. This is the kind of fight, or fights, should I say, the past two anyway, which ruin careers as such. This, a concussive knockout can take and seriously affect the punch resistance. Will it take him from somebody that can take a punch well, as demonstrated, to somebody that will be chinny at that point? Maybe, maybe not. He's got 6 months off. He needs to repair literally anyway. Legacy-wise, compared to other boxers in the past with their careers, you've got the usual record where they go undefeated for so long, maybe a couple of blips on the way, but they become champion. The defenses, they lose. At that point, they might have the rematch, lose again to the same person, then retire. I think that is such a good way to leave the sport. At least if you don't want to go out on a loss. It's kind of, I understand when fighters take 10 steps back and fight a nobody just to have a win at the end of the record. But unfortunately, the public are not as lame. They would not be able to have the wool pulled over their eyes with that one. They realise it's just a gimme and makes a difference whether that's at the end of the record or not. I think that having two losses, and in the manner of especially the last fight, which was heroic and that close, in a life or death fight with possibly the top fighter at the moment, would be a good time to hang up the gloves. But unfortunately, because 35 is about, at this point you started to, be regarded as at the end-ish of the career. And I know that he will not want to go out the sport with the two losses to Fury. I've got a funny feeling that he will be back. It's from a legacy point. It's a funny one because if you look at his career, there are no great names there. I'm not saying that doesn't make him a bad fighter, because I really have always liked Wilder, and as a fighter, because I do like punches. But if you look through the resume, there's not too much there. The Luis Ortiz fight was a very good one, and I would say that was the first one because he did come back from some adversity. The same thing with Fury 3. You got 2 good wins there. Take that away, there is nothing on the record. I don't think he's really dodged anybody. I know you had, supposedly there were some negotiations with Wilder and AJ at the time. And you had the AJ camp, which was saying that Deontay did actually not go ahead with a contract. You had Deontay throwing the same stone at the AJ camp as well. That's always going to happen anyway. There's been nothing really consistent in the past with Wilder that he has dodged anybody. White, possibly. I don't know, but there's nothing. What I'm saying is that some fighters, there's always a little bit of something, or some people can think that they dodge, but there's nothing like, you haven't got a serial dodger here. Is what I'm trying to say. It's not the case of turn down this, turn down that, turn down it. That was not the case. But legacy wise, he's not going to go down at all as an all-time great because of the very weak record which he has. Yes, he will go down as probably one of the hardest one-punch hitters in history, but that is pretty much, I think, how he will be regarded, apart from the memorable third fight with Fury. So back to the question: should he retire? Health-wise, absolutely. Money in the bank, he will relatively have his health intact, and it is, as such, and would be a good time to go. But will it happen? I very much doubt it. Will it probably be announced shortly that he will retire? That wouldn't surprise me. But if that is the case, again, on reflection, when goes out in the wild world, and you see all the people slate him and this and that, he's going to look at himself, 35 or 36 come that time, whatever, even 37. And I think, regardless of all of this, he will be back in the ring chasing glory once again.
That may be his desire, but, and this is the issue, his brain should make this decision, not his heart. And that is, I agree completely that I believe he suffered a concussion in that last fight, if not in prior fights. But the reality of it is if you take a look at the concussion research in other sports, and there has been plenty done by a lot of professional medical organizations, concussions can happen with the slightest of bumps to the head, let alone a serious blow without any headgear. So, given the fact there are 2 types of concussion, if you will, acute and chronic, affecting short-term and long-term, and not just whether he was knocked unconscious or not. Simply being hit in the head can cause a concussion, and being hit in the head repeatedly with such force as was delivered by Tyson Fury, I would argue he had absolutely suffered a concussion. Now, funnily enough, if you go back through the headlines of a day gone by, a couple of years ago, I'm pretty sure Wilder was saying he had delivered a concussion to Tyson Fury. So who knows what will happen in the future? But I certainly know if Muhammad Ali were alive right now, he'd be telling Deontay Wilder to hang up the gloves while you've still got your sanity, while you can still speak coherently. That's what I would argue. There's a lot of research that I've done here in Toronto relative to a local brain institute, a group of professionals, medical doctors, neurologists, who study the impact of injury in sport, specific head injuries, specifically the effects of concussions, and they are altering on many different levels. So when, it raises the question, if I were his advisor or in amongst his team of advisors, I would suggest to Deontay Wilder, hang up the gloves. You've made enough money. You can support your now 6 kids. The daughter that got you into boxing is now taken care of. What more do you have to prove? Someone else might want to challenge you, but who cares? At the end of the day, every single victory in his career that he can claim he knocked out every single opponent that he fought where he won a fight. The only losses came against a man by the name of Fury. So anyway, my point is, I concur. I think he should retire, but for health reasons, plainly.
In defence of Wilder, and obviously Wilder and both Fury is still the hot topic as such at the moment. Not that I've been around on social media for the past couple of days, but a lot of people now are jumping on this, making a big hullabaloo about Wilder to retire, and this big fuss is being made of it. He's 35. He's been knocked out once. Hardish fight prior, but most boxing matches are hard fights. The problem I have, sat here, and bear in mind it's the first thought I've actually given it, is that, well, if people are, beating the drum as such for him to retire, not about all the other heavyweights that have had concussive and serial concussive knockouts within their career, both recent and down the line. Based on that, he shouldn't retire because if there is, as somebody on the chat just said, that he does beat the rest. Yeah, he could well be, and it could be argued that he's the second best out there. He's in the top 5, whether it be the second, third, whatever. But I'm not going to be particularly picking on any boxer for any other reason. It's just as an example, Dillian Whyte got completely clocked Sparko by Povetkin. I didn't hear too many people at the time beating the drum for him to retire, not remembering how old exactly Whyte is, but he must be approaching mid-30s. I'm only guessing, a wild guess, he's probably, 33? It might be 2 or 3 years out. But, he's got to be around that kind of age. Bearing in mind, he had been knocked out prior by Joshua. That was a good knockout. But the one against Povetkin was concussive. Now, all I could remember from the time is that people weren't really beating the same drum in the same manner as for Wilder to retire with Whyte. People were just more concerned with the rematch. You could move on. I'm just going to try and pick some fighters out of the top 10 at the moment. Derek Chisora has been knocked cold. He was knocked cold by Dillian Whyte. He's had hard fights over the years, repeated hard fights. People say that he's speaking a little bit, let me say, punch drunk, if that's the correct term to use. It could be argued. There's other fighters over in the UK. You've got Dave Allen, who was sort of journeyman, kind of not quite world level. They say that he has been speaking a little bit punch drunk as well. But these fighters are continuing, and there is no great outcry for either of those two fighters, for example, to retire. Evander Holyfield got clocked out many times. Many times. He finally hung up the gloves. What was his last fight? That was the Franz Botha one in, excuse me if I'm a couple of years wrong, it's either 2000 or 2011, the last fight. But with the lead up to that, he got knocked out a number of times. Yet, I just find it a little bit odd, and I know this is the hot topic at the moment, but, why is there this big outcry for Wilder to retire? That was arguably a career best win. In losing, yes, but with the quality of the opposition, obviously, in Fury. That was possibly a career best, loss, if you want to put it that way, but a career best performance, that's the correct word, compared to the majority of the wins of his record. Again, the resume is not his fault. He has faced everybody that was the, as such, leading contender or contenders at the time. It's just a weak division, a weak period at the moment, and will be, I think, for a while before everything settles, before the people at the end of their career as such have long gone and the up-and-comers are up and at the top. That is a few years away. This now is a weak-ish period compared to others, especially the 90s, for example, even compared to, I think, the 80s. That was, regarded as the lost years after Muhammad Ali, but it was very emphasized as the lost years just because of, obviously, the lack of Muhammad Ali when he finally fought in 1981. That's obviously with Trevor Berbick. Because 80, it was Larry Holmes, then 81 with Trevor Berbick. Larry Holmes was dominant. You had some good fighters. It was, I know a lot of them were overweight and they were being criticized for that. But then some fighters now can be criticized for that. And I know that the titles back then were changing a lot from, person to person, with the exception of Larry Holmes, because obviously he was champ from 79 to 85, I do believe, until running into Michael Spinks.
Yeah.
It's with all these things in mind, people, fighters have had knockouts. I've just never heard the outcry like I've heard for the moment. And this was just a quick flick through social media. Should he retire? Should he retire? He's been suspended for 6 months, blah, 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 blah. Well, you wouldn't want to fight anyway for 6 months. So why is there the big hullabaloo over that? I really do not know. Curious. But it's a bit of a double-edged sword, where that he could come back and he could do well. In a perfect world, he should retire because he's got a lot of money, especially if the reports were true. And then obviously got all the deductions, but he apparently made $40 million for that fight. And that's obviously $40 million in dollars, so a lot of money regardless. He is and his family are set up for life. Having a couple of losses just at your career, especially to the, as such, number one at the moment, is no hardship whatsoever. It would be a perfect time to retire because it is expected of top elite fighters to have a couple of losses or more at the end of the career. It would be a perfect time, but I can't see it taking place. I think he'll be back. I think he just won't want to retire on that note. And as somebody's correctly said in the chat, that yes, he could probably beat the rest of them. Absolutely. There could be some good fights out there. It's one thing with how it's going to affect him with that concussive knockout, looking at the past fighters, physiologically, how his body is going to respond to that very concussive knockout is what possibly will be the question mark, whether he'll be able to physically match it with the others now, because he could go back and appear no different, just as good as before. But it just, with not knowing the full ins and outs of it, is it a concussive knockout, regardless of who you are, if it's repeated, yes, it's going to affect you. But a concussive knockout for one is not the same as the other. So how he is going to be affected with his punch resistance and everything else is not going to be deterred until if he does actually come back at that point.
Absolutely no one in Deontay Wilder's camp is going to admit to any of the symptoms of a concussion. I think it's the travesty of boxing. It's probably one of the only sports that doesn't talk about concussion openly. I don't think there are any protocols, for example, within any of the boxing commissions, as there are established in other sports. If you are displaying in the ring signs of, like, there are clearly evident signs of a concussion in the ring, and then there are signs of concussive injuries later on in the dressing room, and then perhaps later on in the hospital. Nonetheless, there are roughly 60 symptoms that can be identified for someone on someone's behalf who might have suffered a concussion. So in this particular case, I would argue a concussive blow is severe and impactful and dangerous. And should he continue for his own health? The answer would be no. I just give you an example. I mean, was he unconscious? No, but did he have problems with his balance? Yes. Did he have a glazed look in his eyes? Maybe the ref knew, maybe the ref didn't. Does he have amnesia? I don't know. But he's, was he delayed in his responses to questions being asked of him by the referee at the time? Who knows? I mean, at the end of the day, we fans watching the fights as they progress don't know these questions. But the other question would be, are the actual refs qualified to determine whether or not someone has suffered a serious concussive blow to the head? And quite frankly, any doctor will argue any blow to the head is concussive. That's when your brain moves around inside the skull and it's not very apparent. And it may not become apparent until years later. Like I said, there are chronic concussions and there are acute concussions where the symptoms are easily recognizable day of, and then where you have a chronic condition which leads to, for example, Parkinson's. just for example. So, so as I said earlier, I mean, I'm 99% positive if Muhammad Ali were alive today, he would tell Deontay Wilder to hang up the gloves, spend the rest of his life enjoying his family and his time away from boxing, or even open up a chain of gyms. I'm pretty sure there must be hundreds of, if not thousands, of people in America who'd want to train under his brand. There are plenty of ways to make money. I mean, he doesn't just have to go into the ring to continue his legacy if he thinks he has one. but just for his health alone, I would say, no, stop it, man. Get out the ring.
Just a slight correction to earlier on when I used Dylan White as the example of, there wasn't such a big hullabaloo over him getting knocked out. Being fair, in that first Povetkin fight, he was completely bossing the fight for, it looked easy, but then got the knockout. With the Fury fight, the third one, it was a hard, draining, physical battle, stating the obvious here, followed by that concussive blow. The fight before was an absolute beatdown. And how he's going to come back from that and how he's going to be affected, like I said earlier, you don't know till he is back. You don't find out in the gym. I mean, with Muhammad Ali, he should have retired, many, many, many times. But unfortunately, actually, this is a bad example because sometimes he wasn't actually good in the gym. There were some awful reports coming back in the training camps before his last 2-3 fights. But you don't know until the fighter really comes back. Fighters generally are the last people to know when the best time to retire is, and Muhammad Ali, I guess that he would give the advice that to retire if he was alive. Hopefully that would be based on, I know this is all hypothetical, but looking back at his career, because Muhammad Ali did go way, way, way beyond the point of should he retire? He should have retired after the third fight with Joe Frazier, because that was a killer to both of them, and that did affect them in either fighter. After that third fight, they were never the same. Muhammad Ali, after that, literally just pondered against weak opposition in the second half of the 70s, to the point of losing to Leon Spinks, who was literally a 8-fight novice. That was either the 9th fight with 8 behind him, or he had 7 behind him and that was the 8th fight, but it's either or by 1 fight. And somebody who actually was very limited, he got beat by him. He got better and bossed the return, but everything was, retired again, come back against Larry Holmes in 1980, which should have never happened. Took extreme diuretics, even to the point of moments before the bout, to keep the weight down, weighing in at, was it 217 for the Larry Holmes fight, or just awful. And then is the last person. Then that's such a good example of somebody that went on too late, even if he was never, ever, ever knocked out. But he had draining fight after draining fight, and that the thrill in Manila, the third fight, finished him and both Joe Frazier off. Back to Wilder, he's going to be the last person who, ultimately, absolutely, he's going to be the person that's going to make the decision. Boxers generally make, I think, the wrong ones. I mean, the best, I think the best example of somebody retiring at the right time, never coming back, Lennox Lewis all day. He won, he scraped through against Vitaly Klitschko, but he knew he wasn't right. He didn't come in, in great shape. I know it can be argued that he was there, if I remember right. He was originally fighting, he was scheduled to fight, I think it was not Kevin Johnson, it was let me come back to it in a moment. There are a couple of changes. It was also in the Ocean's 11 filming as well. Came in out of shape, but he knew regardless, in that fight, that he wasn't performing at his best. And if there would have been a rematch with Vitaly, bear in mind he was improving and then up and coming fighter at that point, he would have lost the rematch. He retired and stayed retired. Perfect. And again, moving this over to Wilder, it would be a perfect time, but there is more possibly in the tank as such. Whether he can ever be the same again, for me, that is the question. But yes, it would be a good time. I could only just sound repetitive at that point. It's not going to happen because, if you start, really laying into Wilder that he should retire and all the rest of it, this, that, and the other, there are more that are still active at a top level, which have had harder fights and more devastating knockouts than Wilder did actually, have, Saturday just gone. Dillian White, one example, as I said, Derek Jezora, who's had a few and many hard fights. These are the kind of fighters at this point which should be retired. Derek Chisora. The only problem is he is not even what he was, but he's still managing to put up gutsy performances time and time again, even if he's on this very slow decline. I can never see him retiring. I know he's coming up against Parker in their rematch soon, but he visibly, or should I say, audibly, is not the same. He's not. You look at any kind of interview now compared to a number of years ago. It's not the same speech. Unfortunately, this is the bad side of boxing. He should retire, because give him 10 years after retiring, I don't think he's going to be in a good state, certainly to listen to. There are others, but should he? Great time. And just my conclusion, is he going to? No. If he does, he'll be back. Little crystal balls out again.
Let me just throw this into the mix then. As in other sports, barring a lack of concussion protocols, let's just say, should there be in boxing, whether a players' association or even a medical association, someone who has authority over the commissions and certainly over boxers to make that decision on their behalf? If they were given baseline testing and couldn't meet that baseline prior to entering the ring, perhaps they should be stopped from boxing, whether, well, I would argue permanently. And there are many examples in many other sports where athletes are stopped from performing what they love, what they've been training for their entire lives, how they make a living, has been stopped by a third party intervening on their behalf because of health reasons. Um, if we want you to continue fighting, you'll have to do so under these conditions. But it's an unspoken thing, the concussion, that is, in boxing, and there aren't many people who support a greater analysis or admitting that a third party would have jurisdiction over stopping a fighter from fighting. It's probably a very combative argument, I would imagine, in the upper echelons, the ruling class of boxing.
Yeah, there should be something, I think, worldwide overseeing all the individual worldwide commissions, etc. For this reason and many others as well. It's been harped on in the UK a lot because there's been the string of awful decisions over here, like in other countries as well. And like I said in previous podcast, it's like, I know it's going off topic slightly, but I'll come straight back to that. You've had the bad string of decisions over here, with UK now becoming the new Germany, how Germany was in the 90s with the awful decisions that went on over there. Fighters were petrified to go over there. With health and safety, with the various commissions, as long as they tick the basic entries to continue boxing. I think personally that it is not enough. Each commission does vary with what they do and don't allow, especially in America, because in the UK you've just got the British Boxing Board of Control, where in America you've got all the various states in America, with each state in America being the requirement and the level of checking is completely different. And the best example I will use of that is Evander Holyfield. As much as in the end it was put back after going from exhibition to pro fight to exhibition, and I've got my own theory as to why it's reversed in the end. You couldn't get Holyfield passed in one state, so they changed the venue to Florida, so that Florida, who are less checks, weaker checks, or accept a backhander, then gave the Holyfield fight a thumbs up for a pro fight. to the point of, wasn't just news or fake news or speculation. It was all point. I double checked this because it was difficult to report on it. Is it? Isn't it? I held back, checked on Box Rec. Yes, it had been put as a professional fight. It's funny. And the next day, it's like, actually, no, it was just an exhibition. Is that because there were some poor performances and an outcry over the 57-year-old Holyfield getting knocked out so easily, who shouldn't have been fighting, let alone in an exhibition, let alone in a professional bout? And that is why I think the next day it came out, oh, no, it's just an exhibition, because of the amount of flack the Florida Commission would have taken for that disgusting thumbs up to allow Evander Holyfield to fight in a pro fight at 57. There should be some overruling worldwide commission, I do believe. The usual setup with different, a commission that's made up with, say, one from each country, whatever, that can override, the various commissions, etc. It's something needs to be done at some point, because that was horrifying a few weeks ago with that Holyfield fight. That could have been somebody else there that landed a concussive blow on a 57-year-old Holyfield, let alone a UFC fighter that was not particularly that good. Well, not good, but relatively speaking, I'll choose my words right here, not a top-notch pro fighter. That could have easily been a pro boxer. And admittedly, maybe, it was an older pro boxer, but somebody, if they were retain something with some kind of punch, a proper pro boxer punch on Holyfield, it would have been disastrous. With all these different things that you're hearing, I just think there should be an overruling government body worldwide that has the way of being able to overrule it. Absolute. Because the problem is that even in America, even in the UK, where you've got the British Boxing Board of Control, it was like, again, I know it's off topic slightly, but you had David Haye versus Derek Jezora. Now, this fight happened in 2013. What happened is the British Boxing Board of Control did not sanction it for various reasons. So the promoter, Frank Warren, went to were they Dutch or Belgium or something, some commission elsewhere to come into the UK to cover the bout. It was actually, apparently, the reports were they did a good job and all the medical stuff were at hand. It was very well done. Obviously, there was nothing bad happened. But this, my point is that there's ways around it. So it needs to be not just a governing body and all sounding very good, whatever. It wouldn't never have been sanctioned by. Which fight was that? So I'm just looking at the chat now. It said it would never have been sanctioned by the British Boxing Board of Control. Well, if that's the David Haye versus Derek Jezora fight, it was the reason being was, I think it was because of the outrage that came from the aftermath of Klitschko when he fought Zora. You had, someone was glassed. David Haye had a bottle in his hand and thumped somebody. It was all a big hullabaloo. It was awful, bad press. British Boxing Board of Control didn't sanction it. I give something like some Fedilux Boxing Commission came in to overall, and that's just the problem with any of this, because in theory it could be all good. You can have somebody come in, they can be, it could all look good on paper, but as soon as somebody really wants something to happen, there will be a loophole, and it has to be somehow absolute authority over it. Otherwise, money talks. Like with Evander Holyfield, that would have never, as correctly said by Carl, I do believe, that never would have happened in the UK. There wouldn't have been, for example, let's try and shift it over to a UK fighter, somebody around the same kind of age. Can't remember how old Lennox Lewis is, but let's say roughly, I don't know, he's got to be early 50s or something. It might even be approaching Holyfield's age. But if he applied now to fight somebody, I could never imagine in a month or Sundays the British Boxing Board of Control sanctioning that bout. Never. I've got a lot of problems with them. It's just an opinion. Some people love them. I think they do an absolutely awful job because there's a lot of things where, as such, in inverted brackets, money talks absolutely. And that should never take the place of health, safety, etc. There's been something recent here with a fighter over here that's on the back of 2 defeats, or on the back of a defeat he went for a British title over here, and one of their rules is that if you cannot have a loss on your last fight and be able to fight for a British title. That's been the case and has been the case for a long, long time. Yet it got overruled because of, I don't know, money talks, maybe. It certainly looks that way. So I'm going to be careful with my words. You know, they all say one thing, and there's always one rule for one and one rule for the others. We could be here, I think, for a long time picking apart these sanctioning bodies with what they do or don't do. Going back to the health and safety, you know, if somebody, Holyfield should have fought. The Florida Commission, that was disgusting. And bear in mind, Holyfield is my favourite fighter of all time. It's 57. Come on. Never, never, never. You know, there's a right side, I think, of, you know, where do you set the limit? Well, sometimes it's very difficult, and this is just purely personal, not based on anything whatsoever, and this is just plucking out of thin air. It's as if, for me, you should have 50 should be a defining line, but then people can argue, well, hold on a second, Bernard Hopkins fought into his 50s and was very good. Okay, so you cannot do it on a flat age because everybody physiologically is different at that age, and all of them have had a different career up to that point. You know, Bernard Hopkins was well preserved, so he was able to do that. The difference with Holyfield is that he did actually fight way too long anyway. He should have retired early 2000s. You know, you had the top flight losses. He was in decline against Lewis. You then had a points decision to Larry Donald. You then had him being knocked out by James Toney in the fight after that. You know, and it was just slowly down from there. You know, after the James Toney, that should have been the nail in the coffin. Way too old, way too whatever. And that was, 2003, if I remember right. You know, he went on to 2011 and was back in the ring in a professional fight until they changed it the next day in 2021. What the hell? Really don't get it. One rule for one for the other. It would have to be absolute. Yes, there should be a governing body that could be absolute over the whole thing worldwide, but there's always ways around it. Back to Wilder. He will go through the necessary checks, I guess, and I'm sure he will probably, I don't necessarily pick up something on a brain scan. They're probably give him a thumbs up. Again, I could see him back in the ring. Do you think he'll be back, or do you think he will retire?
I think he'll be back, but I hope he retires. And if you want to take a look at an international governing body, look no further than the International Olympic Committee. And when it comes to banned substances, they have a hard and fast rule. And you take a look at the AIBA, right? So I think the last Olympics, I think it was the Badminton Association that was controlling boxing at the Olympics, I think, anyway. But anyway, there you go. So there's an example where, you know, if an athlete is found with banned substances in his body or her body, they are literally banned from performing. And the Olympic Committee has the right to do so and pull the plug on any athletic performance if they are cheating. So, and I'm just simply, this has nothing to do with cheating, obviously, but if your body cannot take a blow to the head, if your brain might suffer an injury that, quite frankly, is life-threatening, who right now, and you said it, I mean, these guys are all able to pay people off, quite frankly. But should there not be a health-related governing body that steps in, says that it doesn't matter what the governing body or organization or committee says, that fellow or that girl cannot fight because she or he has had, I don't know, 3 brain injuries in the past 2 years, whatever. And that is, I don't know, some kind of baseline they need to set that stops a fighter from fighting. Why? To save their life.
Yeah, well, you know, with Wilder receiving 6 months is not a long. He should receive something like 12 months. Let his body repair. Let the brain settle after that knockout. Then go back. 6 months is nothing because even if he continued and there was no suspension in there, you know, he would be back probably 6 months, 8 months anyway. These silly bans are just like as if it's just, yeah, we just got to do it. So we seem to be doing the right thing and we would give the ban. And so it's as such, you know, slope your shoulders over the decision over to somebody else. You know, we've done our part, we give the ban. What's the point? What is the point of that? I think we should talk about drugs another day, because of that is a real good topic, how that gets abused and bans, and one rule for one rule for the other. That is a good one for another day. What's the point in 6 months, really? He should be given any fight. Sorry, not he. Any fighter should be given a 12-month ban to save them from themselves. And I think as well, it gives them more time to have, some form of hindsight to realistically put everything into place. Because I do believe that at the moment, if we, it's a funny thing yesterday where, because of the emotions, that it's a great fight, we loved the great fight, it was fantastic, one of the best of all world, Fury, one of the best ever here, upon reflection and some hindsight, actually, no, the decision, I think, or my opinion, had changed. And I think with how Wilder would be, Wilder would know now whether he's going to continue or not. And I think if he allowed everything to calm down and say he was off for 12 months, I think he would be able to make a more constructive, less emotional decision to whether he would actually continue or not. He knows if he's fighting or not. I think they should be, it is up to the fighter, unless there's something damning that is there in black and white that you will die or you will have X, Y, Z happen if you fight again. But I just think that some form of like a year, it allows them at least to make, it can never be the right or wrong, or could never be the perfect one, but certainly a more calculated, less emotional decision. He knows if he's fighting again. Everyone's talking about it. People are saying that he'd probably beat everyone out there. Maybe not Usyk. Correctly put in the chat there. Absolutely. He's still, at the moment, unless there's anything bad that's come from the fight, he's still the second, third, fourth best in the world, and would beat the majority regardless. But that, even if that is still the case, I think that sometimes, it's just a good time. It's very easy from the sofa, chair, whatever, to say they should retire, they shouldn't retire. You're not the one in it. But my God, what a good time to retire. And it's a shame there's not more fighters like Lennox Lewis. Yes, not everybody can retire with Lennox Lewis's money, or Wilder's. What his career earnings up to the last fight, I don't know what they were, but he was a multi-millionaire set up for life, and he's just been bolstered by, 40 million after expenses and all the rest of it. He'll probably clear 25 million from that, probably, just as a rough guess. Wow, have that just plonked into your bank account. Lovely. It would be a perfect time for him to sail off into the sunset. But the more I'm thinking about it, the more I think he definitely will be back. He knows whether he's fighting again. Look for him to return. I don't think he will return against soft opposition. I think you're happy. What you're going to see here is where you've got the merry-go-round at the top. You've now got the good old situation that we've covered in depth with White versus Wallin. The winner then fights, or should fight, Fury. But then again, you've got the Usyk AJ rematch, and then that person should really fight Fury regardless. But then you've got the Joe Joyce, who's the mandatory, blah, 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 blah. It's all up in the air. Certain fighters are locked into what is going to be happening next. And I think you'll find that Wilder will take the pickings of just what is below that. And that would be a good test, going in. Let's say, for example, it's not going to happen, but I'm just using it as an example. If there was all of a sudden like Wilder versus Fury 4 announced, wow, what? No, that would be the wrong fight. You don't want to see him in with a tomato can like a lot of his defenses, because it's not going to show how he's been affected by this. The last 2 draining fights finished off by absolute blasting of a knockout. You want to go into a near top line heavyweight to gauge, and that is, if not now, which I deem the best possible time to retire, at least go in, assess how well you do, because sometimes fighters do that, and they land up losing against fighters that they only should have blasted away earlier. But going in with a tomato can would prove nothing. He should go in with one of the top guys that are frozen out of what is happening at the top. And somebody like that should be I know it shouldn't happen because I know that, for example, Joe Joyce should be fighting because he is now the mandatory for the WBO. But somebody like Joe Joyce, who's going to be frozen out, twiddling their thumbs, they should be at the, fighting at the top, but they won't be. They're going to be paid off. Wilder should go in with somebody like that, and I can actually see that happening. If he steps back in opposition, it will prove nothing, and I think respect for him will go downhill. He's gained a lot of praise for what he did. Shame it's been now marred by, was it slippery canvas?
Yeah,
You said
wet
earlier.
canvas. Yep, yep.
Wet canvas, yeah. We'll wait for any others. I do like Wilder. I do think, he just went crazy with all the excuses. I think one was possibly, choose my words right, valid, but was completely watered down by the absolute trash which he brought up. Every excuse under the sun, just clasping at anything. Okay, but please don't do that, Wilder, because he will lose what he's gained by his gallant performance in with Fury. Both fights in a way, because as much as it was a beatdown in that second fight, he still stood there and took it all until Mark Breland rightly threw in the towel. I think he'll be back, and because it's the first time I've actually given it thought, and I think you'll see him in with a Joe Joyce, or possibly, depending what happens with White and Wallin, that kind of scenario, just under what is going on at the top. And with these people, would he beat Dillian White or Wallin? Absolutely. Joe Joyce, question mark. But I think the funny thing with Joe Joyce is I think he's a question mark with anybody because of, how could I put this in the simplest way? He looks bloody awful, but is bloody effective. And as I said to you yesterday, he could be the dark horse in the current mix. But I'm just afraid and it'd be a shame, but I think it is a shame that the dark horse is not going to be given his opportunity, shot, whatever, at the right time, because he is not young, and he's going to reach his peak. And even if he might be physically, not as a boxer, but physically, just as a person, he could be now over the hill now. Regardless how he performs in the future, it won't be as good as possibly how he fights now. And it's just a shame that he's not going to be given his shot at his peak. I still think he could be the dark horse, but see Wilder in with somebody like him, just under the top merry-go-round of what is still continuing to happen at the top of the tree. Only time will tell. Let's see what happens with White versus Wallin, AJ versus Usyk in the rematch, etc. It's still clogged up. It's still no clearer. Wilder, do retire. It won't happen. Fight a decent opponent, engage, and make a decision accordingly. Enough said.
Wow. So yeah, I see we're
just an opinion.
Yeah, no. I think if I think about this a little bit more, I wonder if there was a boxing union whereby it protected the retired interests of boxers, for example.
Nothing. There should be. There's no pension for them. There's no nothing. There should be a mandate. Oh God, this is another discussion. But there should be some kind of pension fund, because it's a horrible thing with boxers, because it paints them as dim-witted, whatever, or thick or something, and unfortunately, a lot of them don't get. I mean, Bo, amount of money he won, and look at how much he hasn't got now.
Right.
Another example, Thomas Hearns. He's worth, what is it, 30,000 he's worth? I'd hate to guess at what his ring earnings were. Kirkland Lang. That's a different story. We'll approach that another day. There's nothing. There's no pension set up. There's a lot of fighters that have earned millions. Vander Holyfield. I've got that one on kids' child support. Okay, that's a different story. There's so many that haven't got, pensions. There has so many that haven't, many things. And I do think that the governing bodies should be, overseeing this as well. And this is worldwide, because I know of no, and I stand to be corrected with this, but I know of no pension kind of setup with any commission, organization, boxing related anywhere in the world. I've not heard of it. It's been talked about so many times. What the stumbling block is, I really don't know. There's been so many attempts by various fighters, or sort of ex-fighters in the past, and recently as well. But they've just come to no avail. I just don't know where the stumbling block is for getting something like this sorted out. You know, uh, 1% of something invested on behalf of the fighters from their earnings. Bearing in mind, okay, this is a double-edged sword again, because it could be argued that, well, hold on a second, a fighter, when he gets his purse, you've got this deduction, that deduction, this 3% commissions, blah blah blah, all the rest of it, and world titles and whatever. Maybe it's just, oh, we'll further money off of them. Well, hold on a second, it's actually for their future. But yeah, that's just something else again that should be looked after by the commissions. It's not a good state. Yes, health has been, or the immediate health ringside, after all the atrocities with Gerald McClellan and a long list of fighters where it wasn't handled correctly, has led to worldwide better medical. But that's on the spot. There still appears to be black holes, and they should be taken more of a decision and different approaches with the health worldwide, and whether fighters should fight or not, etc. And just again, full circle back to Holyfield, perfect example, to the point of that fight was embarrassing, to the point of the Florida Commission the next day saying, oh no, it wasn't a professional fight. That is ridiculous, because they did give the all clear for that. That's pathetic, that's awful, but that is the state of boxing in some countries, where you can go to a different part and then get done by somebody else. Backhander, yes, professional fight, awful. But no, Wilder, I don't think he's in that state yet. Good time to retire. No, he'll be back, and at least fight a good opponent to be able to judge how good he is. Don't go into tomato camp, because what that's going to do is give him a false idea of what he could or should be doing. Go in. Why go in with somebody and blow them out the first round? Wilder's back, yeah, but how's he going to be? How's he going to respond after those two draining fights? And they were draining fights. Yes, and the rest is history. We'll see. But Wilder knows. He knows if he's continuing. I can't imagine if anybody says, "Oh, he's having a good think at the moment." No way. He knows if he's fighting again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my thought regarding the union and retirement had something to do with one of the comments, courtesy of our chatters there, with respect to journeyman. I mean, the reason journeymen literally are fighting to the death, the reason boxers are literally fighting to the death, is because they have no other option. So if they had the option to retire gracefully, pridefully, by saying, hey, my doctor says I should retire, at least they would have a pension to fall back on. And that's why I was raising that issue. It doesn't apply to Wilder. He's got more than enough money to take care of his family and his medical bills. But all I'm saying is he should retire because of what happened in his last fight. Specifically, the blows to the head are too much. And I'm no doctor, but I can recognize elemental concussive symptoms, and he was displaying them. So was I in the dressing room after? Could I speak to him? Could I see whether he was responding appropriately? No. But would anyone admit to that? Yeah, no. So will we see him in the ring again? Likely. Should he be seen in the ring again? I don't think so. That's just my opinion, though.
I know we've only got literally a couple of minutes. I can see there's a couple of comments just about Takam, Dubois. And this is because of somebody mentioned Sanchez with Joe Joyce. Yeah, it's a funny one. That fight was disappointing. Sanchez looks all right, but I think that was very much Effie losing that than Sanchez winning it. I think all that proved is that Sanchez, he's going to go up a couple of notches in the rankings. Should be putting with Usain Bolt or somebody, because he could certainly run quickly. But I just think that just put a black mark against Effie and dropped down. That's one sort of ticked off. The possible people out there are going to be the next up and comers. Yeah, but no, I don't know about everybody else, but I do think Joe Joyce is so funny, because when he turned pro, it was against the UK, and if I remember right, it was Ian Lewisham, I think. Lewisham, whatever was the first fight. He was a reasonable, British, English level fighter. That was on his debut. He's very good, but just looks awful, but it's just effective, and nothing else so far could have been asked of him, apart from just a better style. But then again, the same thing was said about George Foreman back in the day, when Muhammad Ali used to call him the mummy. That's what people said about Joe Joyce. But he's certainly winning. And I know the opposition is glossy at first glance, but lacking because they're all over the hill. But then that's the case with a lot of people at the moment. Their records, he's doing what he's doing and winning with everyone that's been put in front of him, and he hasn't dodged anyone. He's doing well so far. Again, I just think it could be the dark horse. You never know. But is he going to get his shot with himself at the height of his career? That's not going to happen. That's it. I'll leave you there because you're going to have a rapid turnaround, and I need to sort out what is happening on the world of boxing because I am way behind. But
Right on.
yes, until Monday then, when I'll see you next.
Excellent discussion. Thanks very much.
weekend.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
All the
Cheers.
best.
Have a good weekend.
And you.